What's a time where all they had to do was ask instead became a bigger deal than it should have? Story 1. I clean houses for a living, and I try to be communicative with my clients, but especially people who have never had help before tend to feel weird asking for certain things. Miss B had us for almost a year when she finally showed me a list of all the things I've missed or not known. She is there when we clean. She could have told me at any time, but chose to bottle her frustrations up. I had to talk her down from canceling her services and told her, I'm also a human. I miss things, so does helper, but we are always happy to correct it before we leave, and going forward if we know, and somehow we haven't had any issues since. Just talk to me. Story 2. I used to have this guy on my team who refused to ask for time off. He would instead plan a vacation and just call in sick every day. I don't like to ask for doctor's notes, but I have to if someone is calling out day after day after day. So I would check in with him. By this point, he would be sick for several days straight. Then, he would then get pissed off and explode into a rant about how I never give him vacation. He accused me of playing favorites, citing that I let such and such go to Disney last month and I let someone go to Europe for a couple weeks over the summer, and he never gets that same concession. And every time, I would ask the same question. Why didn't you just ask for the time off? Because it's bull. I have my time. I should be able to use it however I want. I agree. So why can't you just do that? Why can't you just say which days you need for vacation? Why must we create conflict? How exactly is trying to skirt a very basic PTO procedure and suspiciously calling in sick every day did a week easier than just submitting your vacation time like everyone else? I never got a legitimate answer, just hemming and hawing about how everything is bull and somehow rigged against him. The really part is, he would have legitimate sick days, but because of how he tried to abuse his sick time, we had to be on top of it if he started to do 2 days in a row, etc. And he always acted like people were being unreasonable with him. Fortunately, he was gone not long after that. Story 3. Woo! When I graduated high school, I received a scholarship to study abroad in Germany for 1 year and live with a host family. After the honeymoon phase passed, my host mom was on the phone every week with the organization that sponsored me complaining about things I did that she didn't like. For example, throwing away school papers in the small receptacle in my bedroom. I never put food trash or anything other than recyclable paper in the bin, which for the record was already there when I moved in. The family said I could use their house phone whenever I wanted to call my fellow American friend who was on the same scholarship. Apparently, I was abusing this privilege. These are just a few examples. It was definitely not a language barrier issue since she spoke fluent English. The sponsor threatened to send me home, so I called them and explained to them that she wasn't communicating her issues to me directly. I was none the wiser that I was doing anything wrong until my sponsor would tell me so. Thankfully, they finally listened and told host mom to start talking to me about her issues directly and that they weren't going to take any more phone calls from her. Story 4. My mother-in-law being really passive-aggressive about not getting to spend time with her grandbabies. She's got an autoimmune disease, but is still able to keep a really busy schedule in her 60s all over town. She'll passively say to my father-in-law or sister-in-law that she's mad she doesn't get more time with her grandkids. She could just talk to us directly and we could work something out, but hearing it through a grapevine is super annoying. Also, it's 100% her schedule, but she doesn't realize that her schedule doesn't really allow for a lot of grandkids' time. She's usually got meetings or volunteering through most of the day and is upset the babies are asleep by 7:30. Story 5. A few years ago, a taxpayer got a letter saying he owed a ton of money and he needed to send documents in. These letters are 100% automated and automatically assigned to auditors. This guy calls me one day, flipping his lid, just screaming at me. Won't let me get a word in at all. He slams the phone down, calls again, yells more. He repeated this 3 times. Then I refused to pick up. 52 calls later, security and IT intercept and pulls his number. For 3 days, they required me to walk out with a police officer because of his threats. So why did he get a letter? He entered his income incorrectly and added several zeros. All we needed was a copy of his W-2, which was written in the letter. Story 6. Was crashing with a friend for a month. He has a big house. He's basically family. I'm his kid's godparent. I live 8,000 miles away in another country, so yeah, wasn't being that guy. Just a guy trying to spend time with my guy and his family. 2 weeks in, he's being really weird, and it turns out he had all these expectations that he never communicated, namely bringing the trash out for them and walking with him and his daughter to and from pre-K in the mornings and afternoons. I cooked for them. I read to her, etc. I wasn't a slouch of a guest. I was like, dude, all you had to do is ask. Turns out he'd been stewing on this for weeks. We laughed about it, but it was a pretty sealed convo. Story 7. One time this happened was at work when a coworker made a huge deal about me not sharing information about a project. Instead of just asking me directly, They escalated it to our manager, claiming I was being uncooperative. The reality? They never mentioned they needed help, and I assumed they were good in their end. A simple, "Hey, could you share your notes?" would have solved everything. Instead, it turned into a mess of misunderstanding and unnecessary tension. Story 8. I'm a professor. The end of course paper is worth a significant part of the grade. It's a case study with a kind of prescriptive format. While I think I've been clear about my expectations, I'm definitely looking for the information to be organized and presented in a specific way. Through the past few months, we've had a few zero-point deliverables for them to submit outlines and working drafts for comment. About half the class hasn't turned in anything. No big deal. It's not for a grade. It's literally just an opportunity to get some feedback. Up until the week that the papers are due, I'm so eager to provide feedback. I very much feel like I'm willing to help them as much as I can up until it's due. All they need to do is ask. Now that the course is about to close, I'm getting the sense that a few students are starting to panic. The papers are due next week, and I've had a few students reach out asking for me to read their 10-plus page drafts and ask for extensions. I'm for sure not taking time away from my family over the Thanksgiving holiday because you haven't planned ahead. I genuinely don't think I could have made myself any more available over the lead up to the due date. It's due when it's due. If a student didn't take advantage of the past month and they turn in a lemon of a final product, tough. Story 9. Worked at a health benefits company, and one of the clients was the NBA. An employee needed to fax eligibility records over a secured line and edit up. Instead of asking about why the number didn't match where it was supposed to go, where it did go was a law office. Law office contacted the NBA lawyered up, and the company got sued, rightfully so. And in hindsight, the law office did a fantastic job handling the situation. Kobe Bryant's SSN just randomly going out where it shouldn't. Oh, and we lost NBA as a client. Story 10. Working on a group project in college, it was kind of a project because it needed to be built one piece at a time. So person A did some work and we met up. He was mad we hadn't done anything. We literally couldn't until he was done. So he went and talked to the professor and got special permission to not only leave our group, so now it's 2 people in ours, but join another, so they have 4. He then made it a point to tell us we couldn't use his code, software development. Well, we went to the professor and made our case. Yeah, you can use his code. I just told him that, so you 2 would come talk to me. So he was super pissed we used his code. The real kicker is his code was so bad I had to redo it all anyway. I spent all spring break working on that ass of a project. Story 11. I remember a time at work when my team had a problem with our project. Instead of just asking me for help, they started making assumptions and gossiping. It turned into a big issue, and people got stressed out. If they just asked me straight up, we could have fixed it fast. But instead, it became this whole drama that affected everyone's mood. It was really unnecessary. Sometimes people just need to speak up instead of letting things blow up. Story 12. My stepkids habitually don't tell my wife, and I stuff until it explodes. This last weekend was spent canceling one of their bank cards because they gave it to some scammer on Discord 2 weeks ago. Thankfully, they hadn't done anything with it by the time we were notified, but why they just thought to not do anything is what concerned us the most. Story 13. Literally this past semester for one of my college courses, my group had to make a presentation for a chapter in the book we had to read. Only we didn't know for certain what chapter we were doing. I suggested just emailing the professor and asking, but the other 3 members were like, no, then he'll know we haven't started it. So I did email the professor, and he literally answered it with, "You are doing this chapter number." Literally fixed the problem with a single email. Story 14. We remodeled our back garden about 10 years ago. There were some complaints about planning, but we were found to be within our rights for all the work we wanted to do. The wall between our garden and our neighbors was about 1 m high at the top of the garden and 1.5 m high at the bottom. We used to chat with our neighbor over the wall regularly, so I didn't want to change that dynamic. One day I heard raised voices and went out to find my neighbor arguing with the brickie who was rebuilding the wall. When I arrived, the brickie asked me how high I wanted the wall. I said, "Keep it the same height as it was, just not falling down like it was," hoping to get a smile. My neighbor snorted, glared at me, then walked off. Later that afternoon, a handwritten note came through the door telling us to never speak to him again, unless it was through a solicitor. He hasn't spoken to us since. Turns out he wanted to do his garden and make it a bit more private. He wanted a higher wall of 2 m. If he just said that at the time and asked, we'd have built the wall to the height he wanted and just charged for the extra material and work. Instead, he's now a sad, lonely old man who skulls back into the house whenever he sees us. Story 15. When I moved into a 3rd-floor apartment, I talked to the guy immediately below me and asked him to send me a text if there are any problems. I found out months later that I was inadvertently making disruptive noise, and instead of texting me, he complained to our slumlord manager, who couldn't be asked to tell me, so I'd been making a ton of noise, and I thought everything was fine. I didn't get along with him after that. Story 16. I used to do document review for large legal actions like major mergers, acquisitions, and class action lawsuits. When Comey busted out with news that more Hillary Clinton emails had been found on another computer that one of Clinton's campaign advisors had borrowed from her husband, the first thing I said was, they're all going to be duplicates. Anyone who has done document review of email accounts would know this. All Comey had to do was ask someone who had actually been doing the reviews, and they could have told him that. Story 17. I used to work as a supervisor at a water park. On all the slides, top and bottom, there were signs and a recording in multiple languages saying, remove all loose articles before riding. Of course, every day people wouldn't heed the signs, the recordings, or the lifeguards, and they'd go down with loose cash, sunglasses, and other assorted articles of the loose and/or valuable variety. For many attractions, it was as easy as the bottom lifeguard walking up a slide and picking things up in 6 or less water, no problem. However, other slides had pools that you'd shoot out into, very dangerous to have people in the water, so we couldn't look for things without stopping the dispatch, which meant the line would get longer and people would complain. Our usual SOP was that we would stop the dispatch if the line was short and/or we hadn't stopped recently, and either the supervisor or the guard would dive and retrieve any lost articles. Those articles were supposed to be delivered to our guest services to be logged for stats of items lost and claimed, but I was generally cool if someone gave an explicit description of the article. One day, I was at the bottom of a ride with a catch pool monitoring the dispatch, and a guy came down, lost his glasses that were on his head, and he immediately turns around and starts diving for them himself. The guard is yelling. I start yelling. We stop dispatch when it's clear he isn't listening and almost gets clobbered twice. This pool had a pretty wicked water current, so the guy had no idea what he was doing and clearly couldn't see them, so he finally comes out. He now locks onto me yelling at him, and with the supervisor outfit on, and starts laying into me about his $300 Ray-Bans that I'd better get for him right now. I let him yell me back a few steps to clear the water and line and resume dispatch, and I explained to him that what he did was incredibly dangerous, and the priority is his safety. Sunglasses are easy to retrieve once he's clear. He wasn't hearing a word. Screaming, 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 threats and hand gestures. Another supervisor had come over to back me up and called security. They arrived and basically told him to shut up or he'd be escorted out. I told him I'd be happy to get his glasses. I just needed him to clear the exit and disengage so that I could get in the water. Nope, still screaming. My manager makes it out from her office, sort of pushes me out the way and gets his attention, and I get in the water. Unfortunately, his Ray-Bans got extremely scratched up from the bottom of the pool, and the lenses were basically ruined. If only he just exited the pool and asked, or actually held on to them in the first place. TLDR. If you don't listen to the staff at water parks, your chances of getting your stuff back in working order go down exponentially. Story 18. I was in a knitting group where we each made a square, and they were all sewn together into a blanket for a friend. I designed my own square with a distinctive animal pattern on it, and I put the design process on my Ravelry page. My pencil drawing turned by hand into knitting graph knitted into the square. Some designer saw my sketch, copied my graph, used it in multiples on an item, and put the pattern up for sale. We were both in a group, and that's where they saw it. Mine was obviously older by 3 years. If they had asked, I would have been flattered and glad to give permission to use my work, but they just took it and used it. Story 19. So when I'm laid off for the winter, seasonal work, I do gig work for a company that basically provides designated drivers. You drive to where you want to party, drink, smoke a joint, whatever. We come and drive you home in your car when you're done. Ottawa has a lot of semi-rural, high-income suburbs, and we offer a more personal and classier experience than Uber or a cab, and public transit barely goes to these areas even during rush hour. It's actually a super fun job, and you meet interesting people, edit, and drive some incredible cars. So many Porsches, Audis, and Mercs even drove an AMG GT. Well, St. Patrick's Day, 2024. I was out doing drives, and it was shockingly slow. We sat around for over 2 hours after our first drive and got nothing, so dispatch told us to head home for the night. I drop off my partner and head home. I hop on the major highway that runs through the city, and about 150 meters in front of me, an SUV drifts into a K-rail where there was some construction. Now, if you've ever seen cars hit these concrete barriers at speed, you know that it makes the car hop. The SUV hops, spins out, and smashes into some portable water jug barriers. I got so lucky the people behind me were all paying attention. Debris everywhere, and I had to slam on the brakes and come to a stop on a highway where everyone is doing over 100 kph. Everyone behind me realized what was happening and was able to stop. We checked on the driver. Absolutely wasted. So wasted I originally thought he had a head injury. I was so angry. I waited for the cops, filled out a statement, everything. The cop was blown away when I told her what I was coming from doing. They know us and what we do, and are generally very appreciative of what we do. All this dude had to do was call me. Literally. We were doing nothing. We could have been anywhere in Ottawa in approximately 20 minutes. But no, he didn't. He could have killed someone and did almost kill himself and now had a whole whack of charges against him. And I will show up for court. Even if he was broke, the boss would have sent us out anyways and would have just dealt with the dude later in the week when he was sober. We're a flexible company like that, and the boss would have made sure we got paid even if he didn't. All this had to do was ask. Story 20. As a teacher, when students steal stuff out of your classroom, candy, snacks, water bottles, etc., usually if they just ask, answer would more than likely be yes. I stopped bringing stuff because I was tired of thieves. And yes, they have zero remorse and zero recourse for their actions. Zero accountability as well. And there are more kids who steal than I would like to admit. Story 21. Had a group interview where we were tasked with designing a trailer to carry some cargo. Pretty abstract, but at the start we were allowed to ask 10 questions about the cargo. Turns out we could have just asked to have it, but instead we all asked stuff like what size is it delicate, etc. So spent the remainder of the task designing something we didn't know the purpose of. Story 22. I was a new paralegal at a law firm. I gave an assignment to a legal secretary, and she ran to HR about it. Apparently, I wasn't supposed to delegate work to the legal secretaries in this law firm. All the legal secretary, Sue, had to do was to explain to me that she only took assignments from the attorneys of this law firm. Fortunately, the HR person was nice about the situation and explained that I couldn't delegate work to the legal secretaries. I said that was fine. Thank you for letting me know. Story 23. I was couch surfing in Australia and the host kept getting snippier with me, and after a while she told me that the last people she hosted made her a cup of tea every day. Well, I practically never make people tea because that's one of those things people are weird about, needing it a specific way, and most of the people I'd stayed with had been like that. I don't think I ever even made myself a cup of tea at her house. I mean, I cooked with her, went grocery shopping with her, helped clean, etc., but she was mad because I wasn't exactly like the previous guest. It was wild. And of course I wasn't going to start making her tea after she'd been passive-aggressive for several days. Story 24. Went to collect my car after it was serviced. Was told the apprentice wanted to buy it. I thought they were joking because it's pretty old, and I'd just filled a panel with bog and a couple of coats of paint. Was washing the car when I noticed cuts in the bog patch. They'd pressed into it with something sharp to see what it was covering. Now I need to sand, patch, and spray again. If they'd asked, I would have told them the whole panel needs replacing, and it was just keeping rust at bay. They keep ringing to ask if I want to sell, and I may have considered it if they weren't such arseholes to make me spend more money and do more work. Story 25. Locksmith went to a break-in to change the locks. Customer tells me they got their car towed to the dealer to get new keys. I freak out and ask if it's already being worked on. It is. My price is $350. Dealer charged them $2K including tow. Never get anything from a dealer unless you have a specific reason to do so. Some parts are better genuine, but 80% of dealer things are overpriced. We call them stealers for a very good reason. Story 26. Our shop sold a lady a computer. Months later, she phones up irate at all the issues she's been constantly having. It was the greatest hits of complaints. Nothing but problems, issue after issue, been happening for months. Started the day I got it. Have you phoned about these issues before? No. Took me 10 minutes to get her to calm down. Then finally she agreed to bring it in one day, at which point I fixed all her issues in about 15 minutes, free of charge, 90% of which were user error or simple subtle differences in different OSes. Story 27. Great thread, and it reminds us that good communication can be difficult. It is tough to be honest, articulate, and forward about your goals. That sort of vulnerability can be taken advantage of. However, a lot of the time there is a place where all parties can get more of what they want if they just talk to each other and invest some trust in each other. I'm pretty bad at this, by the way, but I like that this thread reminds me it is worth working on. Story 28. This was told to me by my ex-classmate. When he was in primary school, on his first day of school during morning period, he had the urge to pee really bad. But he didn't want to raise his hand and ask for permission to leave because the teacher said something along the lines of, "I don't like it when students frequently excuse themselves to use the toilet during my lesson." The teacher sounded very intimidating too, so he didn't raise his hands, and kept it in for the whole morning until he just couldn't. The teacher was shocked when he peed all over his seat and asked him why don't he just raised his hands to ask permission to leave for the toilet. And the boy innocently looked up to him and said, it's because he didn't like it when students excused themselves for the toilet during his lessons. Story 29. I don't know if this counts, but I am going through a situation right now. BF and I broke up after we voted on election day due to being incompatible. He also told me I had 45 days to find a new place and he'd be willing to extend it if I couldn't find anything by that time, and that I could keep gifts and certain things like the extra TV and a laptop. So I thought everything was fine, but I knew it was going to be awkward for a bit. He even invited me to go to the Renaissance Fair, but I declined because I was still processing all this, as well as having to deal with background checks for a new job that he helped me get into. I managed to find a place and gave him a timeline of when I expect to have all my stuff gone from his place. I was able to pack almost everything in like a day or two. I thought he'd be glad that I was making progress so quickly, but ever since then he has given me passive-aggressive / backhanded comments, constantly asks me if I had contacted my friend to make sure I get more of my stuff out even though I'm waiting for a bed delivery, and he got all my stuff and put into a corner of a room without asking. I've been making sure that he doesn't get involved in helping me move out. The thing is, he told me that he felt we were incompatible for months. I honestly kind of saw this coming, since he always seemed bothered whenever I was around, and whenever I asked, he would tell me not to assume. I wished he had broken up with me sooner or communicated to me that whatever I was doing wrong was a deal breaker for him, but they came off as snide remarks or unserious jokes. And now I'm dealing with the contempt and resentment because of months of him stewing. I'm trying to keep it together and not show him how much this all hurts me, keep it amicable, and make this as easy for the both of us. Now, if you'll excuse me, I plan on being single for the next 5 years. Story 30. I'm a teacher and I wouldn't be nagging my students over and over again for their assignment that they didn't do because they couldn't be bothered raising their hand and asking a question. We've started a new timetable, so one of the first things I mentioned was, nothing gets me more angry than someone just sitting there and doing nothing. Ask me for help. They expect me to be a bloody mind reader. Story 31. My on the way to being an ex is delaying mediation, moving to lawyers, etc., but it's baffling to me why. I just want to move on. If she only asked for something specific, I'd probably say yes and just move on. She keeps trying to read into every financial statement and doesn't feel the split is going to be fair, etc. I keep asking the mediator and my lawyer, what is her ask? If you don't think it's fair, just name a number you think is fair. Most likely I'd agree to it. But no, she and her representation want to figure it out and go through everything line by line. It's so stupid, a colossal waste of time and money, and likely not in her favor to do this. I wish she'd just ask for what she wanted. Though TBF, her not asking for what she wants and thinking everyone is out to get her is in part led to splitting anyways. Lol. Either that, or her lawyer sensed that my ex was dissatisfied with the way it was going and felt taken advantage of, the perfect mark to make promises to and take her for a very expensive billable ride. Story 32. Many years ago, I let a friend move in with me, rent-free, because he was in a living situation and needed a place to crash. I didn't charge him rent. I cleared out my home office to turn it into a guest room, and I only had one rule: no overnight guests without asking me first so that I knew about it. It was all well and good till the morning I went into the kitchen while getting ready for work, only to find some total stranger dude standing at the counter making coffee. I didn't kick my friend out then and there or anything, but it really soured me on the favor I was doing for him, and within a few weeks, told him that he should start looking for a new place to crash. Story 33. When I was a kid still living at home, my parents used to do this, I think as a way of controlling me and getting more work out of me. I'd be doing some unimagined slight for weeks / months without them saying a word to me about it. Then it would blow up into this massive thing and I'd get my room tossed, get grounded for 6 months, and then have to do extra chores in all my downtime. An example might be washing dishes in the wrong order, so I'd go say, mugs, glassware, plates, cutlery, pots, but they wanted glassware to be done first. Of course, sometimes glass cooking dishes can be dirtier than drinking glasses, so that's why I might not do them first. But no, wrong order. Not that they'd tell me. Then, just to with me, later on the order might change back to what I had originally, and then they'd deny ever saying otherwise. There's a reason we don't talk now. Story 34. I had a friend who did guided tours in New Zealand. I was surprised when he told me that his favorite tourists were Americans, and not just because they tipped. He said that while Americans could be a bit loud, opinionated, and grating at times, if they were unhappy with something, they would always tell the tour guides. If they didn't like the food choices, they would let the guides know on the first day. and the guides could accommodate that and work out something they liked better. Other tourists, particularly Brits, Aussies, and Kiwis, would paint on a smile and say that everything was fine, but then they'd leave complaints at the office or online. Story 35. My girlfriend and I were looking at houses to buy, going to open house inspections. After a day of doing so, she breaks into tears while driving and starts telling me she's trying to accommodate for me with what I want in the house, and I should do the same for her. I was like, what? What's wrong? Is there something you want the house to have? Turns out she wanted an actual laundry room, not a laundry cupboard, but hadn't told me. Now we both joke about how she cried over a laundry lolly. Story 36. My old boss not knowing really what my job was and what my division did. Ask and I'll explain. Huge communication issues, resentments, weird power struggles. My division was treated poorly and targeted by that boss because they suddenly became boss of a big group of people and had no depth of knowledge of how our division worked or why. Only had complaints about us with no room to fix it or their impression of us. No longer at that job and much happier. Story 37. Every time I insist on doing something difficult by myself, instead of asking my husband for help because I feel like I'm a burden on everyone who knows me. Then when I fail at the difficult task and make things worse for myself, my husband helps me. And it's literally the situation in the question. All I had to do was ask. Story 38, small-scale recent example. I recently informed my dungeon master of 4 years that I was going to be leaving the campaign, citing that we didn't communicate well and that my playstyle created friction in the group. The full story is that I found her DMing style to be far too railroady and focused on the story she wanted to tell, not necessarily on the game we wanted to play. I also felt that her spouse was playing a truly obnoxious character. Now, normally I would have just addressed my issues directly to the DM, and we'd work it out. That's pretty standard. And I've known this couple for over a decade. Should be easy to solve, right? Well, the thing is that I did reach out to her the first time an issue came up where I felt a session was thoroughly unenjoyable. Long story short, I had no ability to interact with the world and had to wait 2 hours real time to actually do anything that session. Because we all play remotely, I messaged her over Discord and laid out my concerns and hoped we could discuss it. The result was essentially a panic attack where she went radio silent on me and put the campaign on hold for weeks. All this did was tell me that bringing up table issues would not result in a conversation. Anyways, more and more issues piled on over the next 3 years and my patience finally ran out, so I decided to bail. If she'd have been willing to talk about things 3 years ago and have us both get on the same page, I think a lot of frustration could have been avoided. Story 39. My ex-best friend and I used to work together. When I left that job where they treated me terribly, I got a job doing shifts. They were always the same pattern, and every 4 weeks I had a week off, so I had plenty of free time, more than I've ever had before. She worked MF 9/5, so I would come see her after she finished, but before I started work or on one of my days off. Same pattern unless I took overtime. One day I thought, hang on, I'm doing all the scheduling here. I drive, but she doesn't, so I'd given her leeway before now. So I waited for her to ask to hang out. Nothing. We still talked, but she didn't invite me out. When I finally brought it up with her, she said, "You work shifts. How am I supposed to know when you're free?" I said, "You ask, you literally have to just say, hey, I'm free Friday, want to hang out? And if I'm free, I'm free. If I'm not, we'll do another day." "Well, I don't want you to say no." So I said, "Look, you'll make me feel like you care if you just ask a simple question. Like that's how adult meetups work. You ask if someone is free, you make a plan together like I've done for you." And the conversation just devolved. It hit me that she didn't give a, because if she did, she would ask a simple question to make me feel like she cared, instead of me organizing everything and running around after her. Best friend of almost 5 years. Down the drain because she just wouldn't ask. Story 40. I do contract work for various companies. One of the companies wanted the server I installed to have a static IP address on their network so that they could always access it through that specific IP address. I did it exactly how they specified, and that was by having the device assert its own static IP address. I told them that this could be a problem, but they didn't listen. I also told them that if they ever wanted to make a change to the network, that they should contact me beforehand so that the system I installed wouldn't break drastically. I even told them I'd go out there for free and manually make the change myself if they just called me in advance so that they could keep running seamlessly, and I even put it in the contract terms as a special exception for their company if they just called me in advance. I specifically said this because they had been hinting that they were thinking about replacing their entire network. Well, at 9:30 p.m. on a Tuesday, I get a panicked call from one of the managers at the company saying, "We can't access the server." I asked them if they had made any network changes, and the manager said they had replaced their entire network and that they could no longer access this server. I told them, should have called me beforehand, added them to my normal schedule, which was already booked 3 days out, and charged them my full service call rate. Cost the company a lot of money in both lost revenue and expense for the on-site. Next theme, how do you get out of bed every morning just to go to a job? Story 1. I consider my job as my main sponsor for all the good I have in life, a roof, food, hobbies, trips, etc. It lets me see our relationship a bit more clearly. Yeah, I don't have to love my sponsor, but I gotta show up to get the benefit from them. Same as every F1 driver needing to show up at a Red Bull event or the launch of the new Aston Martin. They need to do that asterisk in order to be allowed to do the other fun stuff. Story 2. This is hitting me hard, reminding me of my quarter-life crisis. I think we've been conditioned to believe that a career or job should be fulfilling, giving us purpose and satisfaction. But honestly, for 99% of people throughout history, that's not true. A job is just a way to pay the bills. The real meaning in life often comes from what you do outside of work. It might sound grim, but take a look at some obituaries. The most compelling ones rarely focus on someone's job. Story 3. By remembering what I'm getting up for, I don't get up for a job. The job is a tool to provide my family a safe, comfortable place to live, to be able to visit my family and buy food and take trips. I focus on that stuff. It also helps that I kind of have a job that helps people. Story 4. I love my job. My weekends go by slower than my work week. It's been like that for 10 plus years and don't expect it to change. I know not everyone will feel this way, but if you can, find something you're passionate about. I took a little less money for a fulfilling career. Never looked back. Story 5. As far as we know, none of us chose to be here, but here we are nonetheless. We are conscious, like it or not. We live in a society we did not create, nor did anyone else. The rules are nothing but a large, imperfect agreement between us all. We're wired to preserve our lives and try to preserve the species, but these problems have been largely solved for us already. If you really want to, you can move to the woods and live as a hermit, or try to work within the system to find a way to be happy. If you spend your life resenting the position you are currently in and don't see a way out, well, sorry, but realize there are always options. Never stop looking for a new path towards happiness. Life's too short not to. Story 6. When we're immature, we all long for the weekends or days off. We fall into a trap of hating work and enjoying days off. We obsessively keep creating a bigger and bigger difference between these days. The trick is to even out the days. Get up early on days off and do fun things on work days. Level out the days. The goal is to look forward to work days more than days off. It's amazing how great your life becomes. Story 7. It gives me my reason to get up and go. I just had 6 weeks off work for medical reasons, and man, that was horrible. I don't understand how people can just not work. Holidays are nice and all, but it's more fulfilling to me to get up and go do something that actually means something to people other than myself. Story 8. The moment I'm scheduled to work, my day is ruined. I have nothing to lose by going into work and killing it. If I call out or perform like I'm only making my future worse, my day doesn't get any better. I have coworkers that call out frequently. Maybe they get a day of housework in, but their future work suffers. I have coworkers that spend half their workday chatting and procrastinating. They eventually have to scramble to barely meet standards, and their social lives aren't any better than mine. If your day is already ruined, kill your job, get promoted, leverage your new skills to apply for a position with a better work-life balance. You have to work to live anyway. Why not be good at it? Story 9. For one, consider burnout as a possibility. Sometimes you just need a break or for things to slow down. Aside from that, if you're feeling this way, it's probably time for a new job. A lot of people say everyone hates their job, just suck it up and go to work. I believe they're lying, or at least they're exaggerating. The fact that they continue to show up is proof of that. To them, a job is a chore and they don't like chores. That's normal. Being absolutely miserable is not normal. I've hated jobs to the point where I was near suicidal. I stopped going to those jobs. Other people were happy with those jobs, but they were not for me. Look for other work, other fields of work, not just other jobs in the same field. Career changes suck, starting over, but it's better than the guaranteed misery. Story 10. I try to get up in the morning, not just to go to the job, but also to drink some tasty coffee, have lunch with colleagues, solve some puzzles and build some at work, then go for a walk, a bar, a concert, spend some time with family, or just play some Disco Elysium. I try to focus on other things in life besides work, and it makes life bearable. Story 11. The desire to provide for men fathers is inherently strong. Even if they don't, physiology suggests they feel something bad if they don't. As a father, I get out of bed every day to go to a job I dislike to provide for my children. I look at my job as a tool for life I want to live outside of work. It's not great, but I doubt I'm unique in this view. Story 12. I don't get out of bed just to go to a job. I get out of bed because my beautiful 2-yo gets up and needs breakfast. Then my 3 months gets up and my wife goes in to feed her. The job allows them to have a place to sleep, food to eat, and clothes to wear. If I didn't have to work, I wouldn't and would spend time with them. But that's not the hand of cards I was dealt, so I have to get up just to go to a job every morning. Story 13. With great difficulty. I've been hitting snooze right up until it leaves me no time to eat breakfast and get ready properly. I kind of stumble into work at the last minute, just to spend most of the pay on rent and a few bills, the savings money on getting my car repaired, and having nothing left to really do anything else. And apparently I'm doing it for another 30 years to retire comfortably, which probably won't happen. Story 14, alarm clock. Seriously though, it's a habit which needs to be cultivated. Before I was able to really do it, I had to drastically improve my mental health, and I had to train myself to look forwards rather than down. For years, I was really unmotivated, dejected, and pessimistic. I focused a lot on how horrible my life was, and I could only think about the future in a bleak way. This changed when I met my to-be wife, but I don't think the takeaway here is hope you meet the right person. I think you need to take advantage of whatever you can in order to recognize a potential future which you'd be happy to realize. Once you have an idea of what you want, it will be easier to view the obstacles in your life as surmountable. It will be easier for you to get out of bed and go to work because you'll have something which makes it worthwhile. Yes, you need to work to survive, but you shouldn't work just to survive. You need to work to thrive.